Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar where we discuss the automation of one of the more complicated, but in our view, fascinating process in commercial real estate. This is utility costs management. And if you have any questions regarding this presentation in the webinar, please reserve them to the end of the webinar where we will tackle them, or drop us an email and we will get back to you if you're watching this webinar as a recording. Now, but coming back to the topic of utility cost management, first of all, before we actually get to the question of automation, I'd like to briefly describe the different approaches that we're seeing in utility cost management. And these are based on hundreds of customers and in different countries. And as we're seeing, all of these approaches are being used more or less so, depending on the type of premises and the region, tradition in the region. So the first approach is to include all the utility costs in the rent, so that you issue just one rent invoice and the tenant doesn't have to think about any costs. It's all up to landlord. The second approach is that you calculate the costs once a year. You look at the actuals, what the costs were, and you fix a rate per month. So the tenant still pays utilities monthly, but based on the fixed rate that is then rebalanced once a year, and then accordingly either landlord or the tenant covers the extra just once a year. And then there's a third approach where utilities are calculated each month, so that for each month all the bills that come in, actual costs, are split then according to the rules between the tenants and directly invoiced by the end of the month. So by the middle of next month, you're done with all the utility topics. So these different approaches have their benefits and their downsides, which is why they're used in different regions that I will briefly touch upon in here. Now, first of all, if the costs are all included in the rent, and it's no concern to the tenant, this effectively is usable in situations where the costs are more predictable. So this means that we're mostly seeing this in case of co-working spaces and small offices, where tenants are fairly similar to each other. Their consumption of electricity, water, and so on is pretty similar in profile. And of course, because of that, it is less work for a landlord. You don't have to do any calculations on a regular basis, and it's straightforward for both sides. But at the same time, it means that landlord takes all the risks and has to have a very good understanding of what the actual costs are, what the potential changes in the costs are, to make sure that their rent calculations then definitely cover all those costs. So if we're talking about more traditional commercial premises, like retail centers, logistics, office centers, and so on, then the second approach is this annual calculations. So this we're seeing most often used in Germany, other DACH countries, and Western Europe, where the monthly rate is fixed. And also we're seeing it very often in situations where the tenant might actually be contracting with the utility providers directly for the individual consumption of utilities. And the landlord only actually has to manage the common area management costs, which are way more predictable. So the advantage of this approach, of course, on the one hand, is that there's less work month to month. It's a fixed rate. And also the cash flow is more predictable on both sides. You know how much to pay, you know how much you get. At the same time, it can be more inconvenient if we talk about shorter leases, because if you're renting the premise for 6 months and you leave, but the utility cost balancing is done once a year, then you might have a risk that you need to pay some extra, like half a year after you've actually left the premises. So So this might be something that both sides have to keep in mind, and consequently also manage this in accounting, which makes accounting a bit more complicated because you have to maintain a reserve to be able to cover the difference if needed on both sides. But yes, this approach is pretty much a standard in DACH countries and Western Europe. It's what everybody expects. So it might be difficult to choose another approach in the beginning. Now, and the third approach is then monthly calculation and invoicing directly to a tenant. This is pretty much a standard in Eastern Europe and also partially Central Europe, definitely Russia. Typically what it means also is that the landlord manages all the utilities, including the individual consumption by the tenants. And because of that, because of the direct invoicing each month, it enables the flexibility and makes it easier to use also on short-term leases, so that if you leave, you get all the balancing done. You don't have to worry about any potential costs being out there 6 months later. So in this sense, the advantage of this approach is that it's clear and transparent. You have cleared up everything by the middle of next month. It enables flexibility. You don't need long-term commitments. But of course, without the proper tools that are increasingly available nowadays, like Moderan, it did mean more work month to month, which is partially also the reason why Western Europe gave up on this approach and went for annual calculations. And because of that it's already become a tradition in Western Europe. Even if you chose to prefer this approach, it might be difficult to adopt in an environment where the tradition is different. But all in all, these are the three different approaches we're widely seeing. They're all used also in different countries. And in different sort of properties, and they all have their advantages and disadvantages. So it's good to know and keep them in mind with your properties. In all of them, you at the end of the day still need to do the calculations, and the calculations are still tricky. So this is part of our business, is helping commercial landlords automate and make the utility calculation process more transparent. Now, just a few words about our background. So what we do, Moderan is a property management software that is focused on the three key components of any landlord. So first of all, you want a clear overview of your property's portfolio, all the KPIs, vacancies, rent income, and so on at any time. And also an overview of your leasable spaces, how many are vacant, how much is vacancy rates, and so on. So we give you an overview of all of this. Then secondly, leases, the core, the main part of your property portfolio. We give you the most extensive and flexible lease rental tool to manage those. And third, pertaining to today's webinar topic, we deal with utility calculations, and we help automate the calculations and especially the exceptions handling. And we are today trusted by commercial real estate owners and managers in many countries, managing more than 8,000 leases already. Modern assets worth more than 2 billion. Here's a short snapshot of some of them, and we have experience with hundreds of properties with them. So that is our background, and working with them, we have learned a lot about the commercial real estate lease management and utilities calculation. And because of our specific focus on commercial real estate, we also know that there are a couple of specifics that make utility calculations so much more complicated in commercial properties and residential properties. And also, on the other hand, where Moderan is particularly strong in managing. So the first aspect is the fact that in commercial real estate, lease terms are often much more flexible than in residential properties. This is because very often the commercial tenants can be bigger players than landlords, because if they're international corporations or retail chains, then they have much more bargaining power and they can negotiate much more exceptions into their lease terms. And especially this refers to utility costs. And the landlord just has to handle those. So this is the tricky part of commercial properties. And then to top this up, in addition, in commercial real estate, the specific feature is also that the space that is being granted can change in time, both for specific contracts and tenants, but also in total. Because if we talk about, for example, retail centers or also business office centers, then if a new tenant comes in, you very often rebuild the space to make it bigger or split it between different tenants. And this means that not only does your space size change for individual contracts, but all in all, the whole leasable space size might change, which is why Moderan specifically handles the lease utility calculations on a daily basis to make sure that it's ultimately fair for the tenants. So these are the two specifics that actually make commercial real estate utility calculations so messy and time consuming, and where we can be of greatest help. So I will touch on 4 topics that help you make the utility calculation more automated and gain the speed and transparency. So the first aspect is the fact that when we've looked at all the different utility calculation Excel models, which they very often are, then we're seeing that no Excel model is the same with everyone. Because even if you have developed a template that is used in different properties, they still tend to be start to diverge. And this means that for someone to understand how the calculations are actually done, it might need additional information from your team. So it's pretty difficult to transfer this process from one team member to another. And this automatically means that there's less transparency, especially if we talk about the properties and the tenant right to actually request the landlord to present the evidence that the calculations have been done correctly for the past years. Now, how we help in this regard is that Moderan provides a standardized setup template. You can adjust it according to the rules in the specific properties, but the advantage is that your team has to learn the rules once, and once they've learned, even if they see a completely new property, they know how Moderan rules are working, so it's so much easier for them to understand how the utility calculation work in each property. And we actually have experience with the fact that it's relatively easy to transition one property to another without much confusion in terms of how the calculations are done. And just to show a few examples here, so the standardized template starts out with the parts of how you enable the cost types for the calculation. So which costs in general you're calculating for a specific property, what are the rules for their calculation, and then basically setting up the different meters where you measure the consumption. So it all starts with setting up the principles for the property. And then as a next step, you get to the second point, which is, again, as we discussed earlier, a particular topic for commercial real estate is the exceptions. Because the exceptions very often tend to come out for the utilities, and you need to be able to handle them. So this is why we have built in Moderan a powerful engine for managing all the exceptions. So this includes, for example, exclusions. You leave certain tenants out of some calculations. You have a fixed rate for some tenants. You have percentages. You have caps that cannot be exceeded, and many more. So our engine covers all the different types of exceptions that you can think of. You can see here for each cost type, you can exclude a certain tenant, fix their rates, add percentage, add-on fees, and so on. And then you have a clear overview for each tenant and each cost, what their specific rule is. And this is in the same format for all the properties. So this helps you, on one hand, standardize, but still be able to manage the exceptions efficiently. Now, third point of what helps automate is, of course, the integrations, which is the future in any property management, commercial real estate especially. And yes, we know also that even with all the remote metering available, there's still meters that need to be, where the data needs to be calculated manually, but less and less so. So this is why Moderan as well has built integrations as well as capability to integrate with your softwares to automate three time-consuming processes in the utility calculation. So this is first the readings import, which we preferably pull in directly from remote metering systems, or also enable Excel imports. Then secondly, you need the bills, the service provider bills to be included, which we can import from accounting or invoicing systems. And once all the utility calculations are done, we can then send the outcome that needs to be invoiced to the tenant directly into the accounting software or the invoicing software. So integrations definitely is the future of transparency and automation. So this is the direction also that Moderan, like many other modern tools, are now offering. And here is an example of some of the integration. So a pretty typical topic is the import of readings. So you can see here the readings database, when they have been imported and all the data relevant, and then already using them in the specific tenant calculations, including the information about when this reading was pulled in with all the details. So yes, integration is definitely one important step in the automations. And to sum it all up, the automation as a whole. So I guess the main question is what do you feel is the utility calculation process, in your view, in your portfolio, transparent and efficient, or is there any space for improvement? So Moderan has definitely worked on making this automation possible through standardized processes. And our customers have managed to turn utility calculation in a process that takes minutes instead of hours or sometimes days that it used to. And here, this automation, at the end of the day, what it gives you is not just the speed and efficiency, but also a better overview, a clearer overview of all of your costs and how they're calculated to your tenants and what is left for you. So, for example, we have an overview of all the profit state or the balance. So here you can see clearly by each cost type. So how much you're charging your tenants for this period, what is the cost that you actually had to pay as a landlord, and what is the difference. So ideally, it should maybe be all zeros here, or depending on what the terms you have agreed with the tenant, there are sometimes minuses, sometimes pluses, but at the end of the day, you want to understand how much you are charging out of your own costs. And then, of course, you want to show what is the outcome for each tenant. So this is the overview for one tenant. What is their total consumption of each cost type? Where also in terms of units for individual costs and as a sum of the general costs. So different sorts of overviews that give you the confidence that you have the overview of what's going on with the utilities in your portfolio. To sum it up, it is our goal to help commercial landlords to get more transparency and speed in the utility cost processing, which is, as we discussed, less glamorous, but still a relatively time-consuming and no less important part of managing properties. And as we're seeing, the main ways to make it more transparent and efficient is first to use the standardized setup that Moderan is offering. You need a powerful tool to manage all the exceptions in different properties. Integrations is a way forward to help speed it up and not waste your team's time on manual data input. And all together, this sort of automation gives you more clarity and more speed in managing your properties. So this is what we're doing, and then how we're helping automate the utilities management. And if you have questions or would like to see how it works or to discuss with us if this approach might be helpful for your portfolio, then please do reach out to us. We would be happy to talk to you. So thank you for listening and looking forward to talking to you in the future and discussing your specific portfolio needs.